We should be rolling.
Are we rolling?
We're rolling with our friends here.
We are rolling. I'm going to bring up the thing and it's going to make some noise probably. Nope. Yep, that's me. Okay. I was like, is that what I'm wearing today?
Is that I have, yeah. Which color hat is Phil wearing today? That's what I do. Hey, everybody.
It is 10 a.m. here in Nashville and 11 a.m. in Cincinnati. And we are here for our weekly, I don't even, I have trouble deciding what to call this. Our show, our live stream.
It's not a podcast.
It's not a podcast.
I like to think of it as a get-together.
A get-together. Our
it's
weekly
a virtual,
get-together.
I hope it's a virtual conversation,
Yeah.
With you and me and some of our friends.
It doesn't fit into a neat box.
No.
But we are here. We are You There, God? It's Kira and Phil. And I'm Kira.
And I'm Phil. Kira, you're down at St. Anne's in Nashville.
I am. And you are at Church of the Redeemer in Cincinnati, Ohio. The Queen City.
The Queen City. Yes. That's my friend right there. Good stuff. Good stuff. And good morning, Leslie. And good morning, Lisa. We haven't heard from Betsy yet. Hopefully she'll show up. And anyone else that's joining us. It's a holiday for our generation. It's 420.
I was like, it is? What is it? So smoke them if you got them, folks.
Yeah, right. I won't be, and neither will Kira, but others, that's up to them. Speaking of which, Kira, right. I have a couple questions for you.
Oh, yeah? I mean, that's a good place to start, I guess.
So what kind of, what's your favorite cereal?
Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Like, are we talking about like a treat cereal or like a regular everyday cereal?
Oh, okay. So treat cereal, it is Cinnamon Toast Crunch. Yes. Objectively, that's the best cereal, unquestionably. It's just the freaking best.
Yeah.
Good morning, Betsy. Good morning, Mary. Okay, I'm with you. Now, what would be your everyday?
I'd say my everyday is maybe like Crispix.
Oh gosh, who are you? What have you? You're stealing all my favorite things.
No, yes, this is just what I grew up with.
Also correct. Crispix is amazing.
And it's like it's kind of healthy. I mean, in the way that like Cheerios are, or
right. Here's the problem with cereal. I can't ever do cereal every day because I am not capable of eating one bowl of anything. It's always like 3 bowls in, and I'm like, that was a mistake. I was supposed to be a person today, but instead I ate 3 bowls of Crispix. It's healthy.
Yeah.
Oh man. Oh, I can't believe it. We have the same cereals. This is amazing to me. All right, but this isn't theological enough, so let me ask you this.
Okay.
What would Jesus' favorite cereal be?
Oh gosh. I don't know. I was trying to think about something that's like maybe fish related because we have, I don't
think there's any fish cereal.
No, I know, but we have a number of instances now that we're in Eastertide of Jesus eating fish at breakfast. So,
true.
I feel like it might be something like, I don't know, like I'm thinking like in the realm of Lucky Charms for some reason.
Oh, wow. So you've got Jesus the splurger.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking about Jesus the reasonable, like Jesus the he's thinking about what's good for him, but also willing to like kind of enjoy himself. So I'm kind of thinking about like frosted mini wheats.
Ooh.
Like they're utilitarian.
Yes.
Right? But there's a bit of literal sugar right on top.
Yeah, frosted mini wheats are great in that they do have that like they feel like they're healthy, but they also taste like they're not.
Well, they're substantial. Like there's like,
yeah.
The problem with Crispix is you don't think you've eaten anything. And so you really end up drinking a gallon of milk by accident.
That's true. It's not particularly filling. Yeah.
Right. But until it's too filling. Right.
Yes.
But then frosted mini wheats, like they're so thick, you're like, something's happening right now. Betsy loves Tony the Tiger and Frosted Flakes. I just introduced Reed to Frosted Flakes recently. We were in the grocery store and he saw them and he didn't know what they were. And he's like, what are these? And I was like, well, those are Frosted Flakes. And he's like, I've never had those. And I was like, well, we're changing that today.
Yeah.
And then we did. This is good. Friends who are in the chat, I have a couple things I want to ask Kira today, and she may have some questions for me. Ooh, matzo flakes. I like it, Lisa. Lisa's going deep. I dig it. But we also would love your questions this morning. We don't have any questions from you all. Would Jesus go for cow's milk or plant-based milk? I would say Jesus would want cow's milk, but I would say he'd want it from like a local dairy. Like it would have to be, what do you call it? Like humanely is not the right word. Maybe it is the right word, but like.
Yeah, like locally, like, well-treated, ethically sourced.
Ethically sourced. I think Jesus would go for ethically sourced cow's milk. That's my guess. My vegan friends who are all watching this show with great anticipation for how I will answer this question are disappointed in me right now. But
well, really, there's not like a ton of cows in, Israel.
Oh, so it would be goat's milk?
I'm thinking it'd probably be like goat's milk, goats or sheep's milk. Yeah.
Have you ever had goat or sheep's milk?
Not straight. I mean, I've had goat's milk cheeses and sheep's milk cheeses.
Sure. Yeah, but that's got to be different. I mean, I wonder how it tastes. Leslie likes Fruit Loops. I wouldn't kick out Fruit Loops. I wouldn't turn them down. I mean, all the major ones, Fruit Loops, I mean, Apple Jacks are glory.
Apple Jacks. I feel like we had like sort of our everyday cereals and then we had like vacation cereals.
Yes, and Apple Jacks. I mean, Cinnamon Toast Crunch, again, is the king of cereals.
Yes.
But Apple Jacks is like hanging out there. Maybe the Jack of cereals. It's a face card. It deserves a face card.
The Joker of cereals.
It's a face card. It deserves. Fruit Loops are lovely. Lucky Charms are really fantastic. When you went camping, right? And you had the little mini version of the cereal.
Yep.
No, I love that. Okay, I don't know anything about Enneagrams.
Oh.
But I know that you and I are both 4s.
Yes.
And so that means that we're like diva-ish and melancholy.
We're very in our feels.
We have all sorts of feels. We lead from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of love there. A lot of love. We want to be understood. And we like being unique. And by the way, so here's something I know. When you found out that I also was a 4, you had mixed feelings because on one hand, it felt good to be like known. And on the other hand, it annoys you when anyone else is like you.
Yeah, you're like, no, you're not, but you're not, like, you're different.
No, you're different from me. You're a different kind of 4. I can feel it. You're a 4 with a 3-wing, and I'm a 4 with a 5-wing, and that's how I can tell the difference.
Yeah.
I don't know what any of that means. But I do, it's interesting. A lot of our, this is something I'm curious about.
Uh-huh.
A lot of our clergy colleagues, there's just so many different ways to analyze what it's like to be a person.
Yes.
Right. So Myers-Briggs gets kind of a weird reputation. Like some people swear by it, other people like mock it and treat it like it's, and some people talk about it like it's 20th century or 19th century astrology. Right. I'm in psychoanalysis, which is its own Freudian psychoanalysis, which is its own kind of thing. And my psychoanalyst had never even heard of the Enneagram.
Okay.
He was just like, he wasn't against it because he was just like, if one day I said to you, like, how do you feel about Snorgelblatt? And you were like, did you make that word up? What is that? Like, no, it's a whole thing about my personality. And you were like, I'm not against it. I don't know what it is. That's how he was with Enneagram. I was like, you heard of the Enneagram? He's like, no. And I was like, you're like, don't like it? He's like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about.
I just don't know what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, before we get back, I have questions about the Enneagram, but I just want to address what Leslie just said, that Fruit Loops are surprisingly healthy. They may or may not be, but what I find fascinating is when I'm now as a parent actually looking at the labels for the nutritional labels between the cereals I think my kids can have and the ones I think they can't have, they are almost identical.
Right. You're like Crispix and Cheerios or
Right.
Fruit Loops and Cinnamon Toast
and
Crunch.
Apple Jacks. And you look and you're like, they're almost
the same picture.
Like literally. So you're probably right, Leslie, that I don't know if they're healthy, but they're at least as healthy as other things that we consider healthy cereals. Unless you're going to like feed your kid like Mueslix or grape nuts. And I want my kids to like me when they grow up. So that's not going to happen.
Right. I mean, to kind of rant on that for a little bit, there are different purposes for when we eat certain things.
Yes.
Sometimes you want to eat a donut and that's fine. And sometimes I want a Denver omelet and that's fine. And like, they're not, they meet different goals, right? Sometimes I want a really filling breakfast that's going to keep me going all day. And sometimes I want something sweet with my coffee, and those just meet different goals. And so, yeah, if you're looking at like, well, what is the sugar content? If you're comparing like a sugary cereal and then a not sugary cereal, and you look at them and they're actually kind of the same or not very different. And you're like, well, this is all just a lie.
Right. Oh, we've lied to ourselves.
It's like that whole thing about how like there are salads with more calories than a hamburger or whatever. And like, sure, whatever. If you're counting calories, then you might want to choose the lower calorie option. If you want to eat more vegetables, you might choose the salad. If you want something you can eat quickly that's going to fill you up and keep you going all day, you might eat the hamburger. Like there are just different ways, different reasons you might choose different things.
And you can convince yourself of anything. So I've been making a lot of sourdough bread. So it turns out I'm always like, you know what I should probably be eating right now? Bread. Bread. Because there's so much. Well, it's all here. I have it. It's like, and I've made it. Yeah. And it tastes good. So I'm like, you know what? I could go and work on a whole like breakfast thing, or I could slice a piece of bread and put it in my mouth and I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's got protein. It's got fiber. It's got, it's 3 ingredients.
Yeah.
What's the problem here, friends?
Toast that sucker and slap some butter and jam on it. And that is like delicious.
The dream. It's the actual dream. That and tortillas, man.
Yeah.
We had tacos from a taco truck last night. And tonight we're going to have tacos from a taco truck. But it's going to be a different taco truck.
A taco truck on every corner.
My literal actual dream. When that was used as a discouragement, I was like, you need to know your audience better, because you've just described my actual dream. Who do I have to vote for to get that many taco trucks?
Right.
They just described living in Southern California, really. And that's great, but it's happening here in Cincinnati. There are 4 within a 10-minute drive of my house.
Oh, nice.
I know. I'm like, and so we're trying them all. My biggest complaint is they're cash only. And I'm just like, what am I, an old? I don't have cash.
Do I carry cash? I don't know.
Like, I love, because we have people who are not our generation on here that are like, wait, do you guys really not carry cash? We don't carry cash. We're really weird. I don't know about, do you carry cash?
I do on occasion. But I don't if I end up carrying cash, like it's by accident.
Like if my mom didn't have a certain number of dollars in her wallet, she would be like, I need to go to the bank. Mm-hmm. Because I need more money, cash dollars in my wallet. Cash dollars, that's what the kids call them. Whereas I have cash actually in my pocket right now, left over because I had to go to the ATM yesterday because I had to get cash for the taco truck.
Yeah.
Right. And it feels good to have money in your pocket, but it's like a high. I think it's a high that our children will never know.
Because it's interesting the way, so the way banking and like credit card fees and all kinds of different fees like get leveraged. So in some sense, I understand why like small businesses like a taco truck or, in order to not pay those fees would do something like cash only.
Yep.
But we are very much addicted to our convenience. It's like, are you sure?
That's the thing is yep. I'm like, so I have to walk 20 feet that way and get cash and give it to you? Oh, I don't know. At McDonald's, I don't even have to get out of my car. And then they'll be like, is McDonald's as good as our food? Well, no, but not even a little bit. It might not even be food, but but like I don't have to get out of my car.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, anyways, I'm finding the perfect taco truck to take you to when you come up to visit.
Okay. This is inspiring me because we have a number of taco trucks kind of in the neighborhood and I just haven't explored them.
Taco trucks are COVID ready in a lot of ways. Like,
yeah,
we hope and pray that the people inside of them have been vaccinated and are taking care of themselves. Now that that's widely available in Cincinnati area for any adults, and hopefully in Nashville for any adults.
Yeah.
But for us, as we try to continue to not have to cook for ourselves 3 meals a day and get outside when the weather's beautiful, you don't have to go indoors still. I'm still not going indoors to eat.
Oh yeah.
I did it a couple weeks ago with someone. It was lovely, but I'm still not there.
Yeah.
It's very strange what this whole thing has done to us.
Yeah, the other month I had kind of told you about my tradition of going to get a hamburger after
The funeral.
a funeral.
Yeah.
And that night I had a lot of stuff going on and my husband was going to get a hamburger for me to go. And I actually finished my vestry meeting a little bit earlier and I was like, hey, like, what if we just go to the place that I normally go to.
Right. And do the thing.
Get a burger and a beer and do that. And he was like, okay. So we went to the place and it was like pretty crowded. It was like 2 for 1 night or something. And it's the kind of place where they can lift up the kind of garage doors and stuff. So there was some ventilation.
Yeah.
But there were like a lot of people there. Yeah. And I'm fully vaccinated. He wasn't at the time. And he was like, and I was like, are you okay with this? And he was like, not really, but like, let's do it.
And so then you do it. And then afterwards you're like, and never again. It's like a weird, it's just going to be a while.
Yeah. And like, we've been to some other places where there's a little bit more spacing and they'd kind of moved tables around and the seating was definitely not at 100%, but the way that Nashville's rules and regulations are right now, like it's essentially a free-for-all.
Yeah. Most places really are. And it's always, I don't know. I trust us to do it right for ourselves. And that's really all I can say, and it's tough. And you feel for businesses, you want them to be okay because they've not been given, most of them have not, there's certain kind of help they've been given on some level, payroll protection for some folks. And that's really been helpful. But my goodness, they're trying to figure out how to keep their businesses alive but I'm not, but at the same time, like we're going to go out at a pace that makes sense to us. And there's also another factor that like, it's really, nobody really talks about, or if they do, they talk about it like kind of almost embarrassingly, which is like, we're also affected by how our friends are choosing to do it. Because like, we're part of a group of people and, you want to be respectful of each other's boundaries and limits. And even if I might be comfortable doing something, I become less comfortable with it if I realize I'm the only one of my friends that's comfortable with it. Like that actually, I'm like, well, I don't want to be the outlier. And so peer pressure actually works. And it's funny because usually that's used in a negative way, or the things that I'm saying, some people can say like, well, that's not okay. But I think it actually makes a lot of sense. It's just kind of like, it's kind of how communities function, and that's actually like, so this is a big thing that I'm writing about right now. So I'm not done with it, but I'm writing about like a lot of the pieces of how we do what we're doing. It's not about you and your safety. It's about how you're trying to take care of others. So like, for instance, the vaccines, well, the masks are an obvious example. Like the mask isn't for you. It's for your neighbor. So the whole thing when someone's like, I feel fine, I don't need to wear a mask. Or, well, I'm not worried about me getting sick, so I don't need to wear a mask. Well, that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what the mask is for.
Yeah.
Like, it's not for you. It's to protect others from you, because you could potentially have a dangerous virus and not know it. So but that it becomes about you. And I've heard that from like reasonable people, right? And I'm like, oh, you're a reasonable person and you misunderstand fundamentally the purpose of the mask. And so, but this is happening with the vaccines now. And this is the crazy thing. To me, I didn't realize this. So you probably knew this because you are generally smarter and more well-read than me. But this is real. Like, in my mind, I'm getting vaccinated so that I can be safe. But the reality is that I'm actually supposed to be getting vaccinated because the higher number of vaccinated people, the lower the transmission rates and the more possible it is to get to herd immunity.
Yes.
So realistically, unless you physically have medical issues that prevent you from being able to be vaccinated, like, you getting vaccinated is your moral responsibility, not for you, but for other people.
Yes.
And how you feel about how your safety is actually not the primary purpose. That's,
yeah.
But like, Curia, I didn't realize that. Like and it's, so if I didn't realize it, and I'm a fairly self-centered dude, but like, if I didn't realize it, that means there's a lot of other people who still don't understand that.
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, this is maybe me being cynical. I don't know if it would necessarily change how they feel about it. I think there is this whole thing has been a really interesting case study in just kind of messaging and how we function as human people, because there's like the scientific data or the scientific research or like what the scientists are saying, and then there's like how we feel about things, and sometimes those are totally different.
And by the way, and they're worth like they're part of the conversation.
Yeah, like the
the
latest data is that like there isn't really, back in the beginning we were all like scrubbing our packages and cleaning stuff and worried about if people share hymnals, if they're going to get COVID from it, and the latest, or not the latest, but this has been true for a while, that basically that is not how COVID-19 is spread.
Transmitted.
And yet every time I go somewhere, when I see people cleaning, it does make me feel better. Like it's this kind of sign of like, well, we take this seriously.
And by the way, like whether you've been vaxxed or not, wear a mask.
Yeah.
One, because it continues to decrease rate of transmission, even if it's a small number. But two, just because you're chilling other people out, and that's actually not a terrible thing. It's not bad for you to be mildly inconvenienced so that someone else that is your neighbor and a part of the body like of Christ, a human being who is imbued with the dignity of its creator, like you, there's nothing wrong with going a little bit out of your way to making them feel just a little bit more at ease in the most difficult time in the history of our lives. No big deal. Like just shut up and put it on, and it's okay. Like, is it obnoxious? Do you hate it? Yes. And also do it. Hey, so I'm working from home and someone's at my front door.
Okay.
Open that, but Leslie has opened the can of worms.
Okay, I see that.
Get her started and I'll be right back.
Okay. So this is Leslie's question that is related to the book of Romans. She says, Jesus died so that everyone who wants to can go to heaven, right? But then Paul is going on about Judgment Day and fire and such. Are there tiers to heaven like Dante's Inferno, but reversed, and the most godly people get the pearly wings, and the plebes who just love Jesus get the normal feathers based on judgment? So it's really interesting that you brought up Dante's Inferno, because I think so much of our cultural picture of what judgment or what hell or what heaven looks like is actually really, really influenced by things that came out of the medieval period, including Dante's Inferno. And if you actually go back to the Bible more, if you like just are reading the Bible, there's very little kind of about how that looks like kind of what we think of as hell, with the fires and the brimstone and the red guy with a pitchfork and horns and tail and all of that. So I think one of the things that we're talking about when you talk about, to go to heaven, is what I think we're actually talking about is salvation. And what do we mean when we talk about salvation? What is salvation? What does salvation do? I think we definitely talk about how God and through Christ we are saved. And there's a question of, okay, we're saved. What are we saved from? Well, this is kind of what you're talking about. Like we're saved in the kind of common imagination. We're saved from hell. We're saved from eternity of burning and torture and all those things. That's kind of what we think about when we think about what we are saved from. But then there's the other question of sort of what are we saved to? I think a lot of people do grow up or are exposed to this kind of religion where it really is about like what I would call kind of fire insurance. You are threatened kind of into believing in Jesus or being a good Christian and a good person because you don't want to go to hell, and that fear is really leveraged in a way to kind of threaten and coerce people, and obviously that is very damaging in a lot of ways, and a lot of people come out of that with a lot of spiritual scars. But then there's the question of what are we saved to? And I think this is kind of your question about heaven. And really the picture that we get in scripture of heaven is sort of the new earth and the new Jerusalem. And it's actually heaven coming down, the kingdom of heaven kind of being instituted on earth. So again, like we often think about, like we're up in the clouds, we've got wings, there are streets of gold, like all of these kinds of conceptions of heaven. When really the scriptural picture of kind of the afterlife or of the new creation is pretty different from that. It's a garden. I mean, we get this in Revelation, in the book of Revelation. It's a garden, it's a city, it's a place where we are constantly worshiping at the throne of God with all of the saints and all of the church. The saints triumphant, the church triumphant, as we call it. And so yeah, Phil, I've been vamping about salvation. So
That's my favorite thing. I mean, who doesn't love salvation? And Kathy Baggett's written in a question connected to this. But first, I want to just really quickly address. You notice, Leslie, that you're thinking about Dante and you're thinking about Bosch, and these. It's really important to recognize the impact that art, and especially like medieval and Renaissance art, has had on our understanding of, or our perception, I should say, of these things. So for instance, you talk about tears of heaven, tears, T-I-E-R-S, to heaven, like Dante's Inferno. Well, in fact, that's what Dante wrote. He wrote three poems. The Divine Comedy is 3 epic poems: the Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. So hell, or fire, purgatory, and heaven. And yes, heaven has tears just like hell, according to Dante. Yes. Which is not the same as according to Jesus, according to the Bible,
according to the Bible
tradition, right? Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of the Divine Comedy in terms of the way that it made me think about. He worked really hard at trying to visually describe in visual and physical ways how our actions here have a lasting impact on our eternal souls. So in hell, the way that one is punished is connected to the way that they lived on earth. Mm-hmm. And in purgatory, the things that the people are working off are connected. The way they work them off is connected to the ways that they both had virtue and vice, so to speak, here on earth. And in heaven, the tiers of heaven, T-I-E-R-S, the levels of heaven, are connected really to the ways that we are lived on earth. And the lowest rung of heaven is the happiest place you could possibly imagine. So it's not like you're in the lowest rung of heaven wishing you were one level up, because it's like saying, it's sort of like being being a soprano and wishing you were a tenor or something. Like you're like, these are totally different things, right? And it's not just a soprano or alto. It's even like further, like these are just different things. They work differently, or like one person being a soprano and another person like being the tuba. Like they're just different, but all are contributing to the symphonic experience of the eternal glory of God, like glorified in humanity, right? So anyways, that's my Dante shtick.
Yeah.
Yes,
I went off a little bit on that.
And as Dan says, Dante was sticking it to the politicos and celebs of his time. Yeah, Dante is, pardon me, a straight shit talker. I love, so I'm nerding out a little bit. I minored in Italian in college, and I took a whole year on the Divine Comedy, and I don't remember a lot of it. So I really, there's so much I forget. But I was so into Dante in college, and like he is like, I mean, like, who gets to the highest level of heaven practically is like some woman he was in love with.
Yeah, right.
Who, by the way, apparently never was really into him. So like, there's a whole like, he's brilliant and deeply flawed. You ready for this? Like when you talk about the fall of humanity, when you talk about the way you picture sin and death, you are almost definitely thinking about John Milton's Paradise Lost and not the Bible.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
So we want to just be clear about those things and how they affect our picture of these things.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's, one of the most, even reading, like, for example, let's take the story of the Nativity. The story of the Nativity in the Bible is actually kind of different from the like Christmas pageant version of the Nativity. And like, that's fine, but I think we need to get a little clearer about that, or
totally. What my dream movie project or is, right? No. I want to do 4 different movies that are based on the 4 Gospels.
Yeah.
And have different actors playing Jesus, and like literally, and you can only tell the story through Matthew, you can only tell the story through Mark, through Luke, through John, so that people could have an opportunity in our current context to understand both the similarities, because there's many, and the differences, because there's many, of how these people are trying to approach the revelation of God and Jesus, and how it's like what they want to tell you about that.
Yeah.
Right.
And of course we can't read in a vacuum. Like that's just not, we're reading through the lens of 2000 years of, for us as sort of like mostly white American people, the kind of lens of Western culture. We're reading with everything we've kind of been exposed to, whether that's, Southern evangelical Christianity and Dante and John Milton and the Mozart Requiem and
and that's
Bach,
okay. It's great. Like it's great, but it's also and we need to realize that it's like a palimpsest. Like there's all these different layers, and you want to look and realize that you're looking at the thing through those, and just like perspective is helpful, right? Yeah. The Rashomon thing, like Dan says. So I want to go back to the first part of Leslie's question, and I want to also bring in Kathy Baggett's question: is going to heaven really our goal? How about learning to recognize, live into, and spreading the kingdom here? So I just want to say really quickly, yes, going to heaven is my goal, and I want to be subversive about that, because I just preached a whole sermon saying the opposite this past Sunday. But here's the deal. Knowledge, and this is essentially my sermon from this past Sunday, which I've just whittled down. We believe in the resurrection of the body and the life everlasting, and that we are destined by God through Jesus for something after this. But the knowledge of that is not meant to make that our whole lives. It's actually meant in many ways to free us up from fear of death, so that we can then, yes, Kathy, live here in a way that spreads the kingdom. But I don't think that you can just narrow it all, and you're not trying to do this, but that someone could just narrow it down to how we live here. How we live here matters tremendously. Part of why it matters, and this is what Dante was getting at too, is because it has an effect on our immortal soul. Because God has destined us, even though we're mortal bodies, God has destined us for immortality. And how we live here has an impact, matters. And so understanding that there's an afterlife and that we're a part of it, I think is meant to inform more fully how we live here. Does that make sense, Kira?
Yeah, I think it's a hard thread, a hard needle to thread between like this is fire insurance and is just like a threat to get you, like your parents would be like, don't do that or I'm going to put you in timeout, or don't fight with your brother anymore,
Right.
or whatever. And this kind of like actually nothing matters because whatever, it's just all about kind of what God is doing.
Yeah.
So I think it actually is, I think, a very hard needle to thread.
All about what God is doing is helpful, though.
Yeah, well, and because to some degree, even when I try to do good, I fail.
Which Paul says in Romans.
Like, I do not do what I want to do. The
evil that I don't want to do, I do all the time. And the good that I want to do, I just can't get down with no matter how hard I try.
Exactly. And I feel that passage like so deep in my bones.
Yep.
And so to some extent, there is a freedom to being told, like, you actually, like, whatever good you are doing is actually just God working through you. And as hard as you can, like, I think a lot about the people who thought they were doing really good things by like bringing Christianity to the New World and, teaching the savages how to be good Christians. And like, they thought they were doing really, really good things. And they were actually perpetrating genocide and, did a lot of bad things in the midst of all of that. So even the good things that I think I might be doing can sometimes end up being bad.
Yeah.
So I can't will my way into doing good.
No. Which is why making it all about being a good person here falls apart.
Yeah.
It's also just exhausting.
It is exhausting because I think it's hard to kind of, again, thread that needle between like, well, if I can't do anything good, I might as well not try. But I think what it should compel us to do is to really ground ourselves in prayer and worship and listening to God and being part of a discerning community like the church that can call us on our bullshit and to have people in our lives, whether they're our clergy or our spiritual directors or our spiritual friends or whatever, who share this kind of value system and share our desire to follow Christ, to be like, hey, I know you think you're doing a good thing, but it is not good.
Right. And that's such tricky territory. And by the way, you could be doing something that's not a good thing and still basically be a good person. You're just like, you're getting it wrong. Like,
yeah. Which I think, oh my gosh, I love to think of myself as a good person and I get it wrong all the time.
Yeah. And you probably are a pretty good person and you get it wrong. And but the idea that if we're good people, we can't hurt anybody or we'll never get it wrong is damaging.
Yeah.
So I want to paint a different picture of the way Paul is talking about talking about salvation in Romans, Leslie, and I don't know if this is helpful. And then Dan brings in the movie The Mission, which is it's a perfect example of the complexity of faith and what works and doesn't work, and all mixed up together. I mean, if you all have not seen The Mission, it's a stellar movie. It just keeps getting older and older because we keep getting older and older. It felt very new when I first saw it. It is now a very old movie. Have you seen The Mission, Kira?
I have not. So because of you and because of my husband and because of some other friends, I am trying to become a movie person.
Oh, I'm glad to help in any way that I can. The main thing that you have to do to be a movie person, though, it's so great, is just watch a bunch of movies. Yes. That's it. There's no one makes you write papers about it. Like, It's not a salvation issue, so you don't go to hell if you haven't watched a certain thing. And if anyone's like annoyed with you for having not seen a movie, then don't be friends with that person.
I know.
I'm always like, when someone's like, don't get mad at me, I haven't seen Lord of the Rings. I'm like, what are you talking about? That's awesome. You get to see it for the first time.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, what an exciting thing to get to see something for the first time. And the oboe is killer in The Mission. You're going to love The Mission, Kira. For you, it's like a movie that will just like,
okay.
I'm
putting this on my movie list.
And that's not like taking your medicine, this movie. This will be like right up your like alley. You're gonna musically, it's stunning. Ennio Morricone does the soundtrack. It's one of the most beautiful scores. There's these really, and it's all about colonialism and but it's very personal. And it's got De Niro when he was good, and Jeremy Irons and Liam Neeson before anyone knew who Liam Neeson was. It's like, it's just a stellar flick. Leslie wants to watch us watch it. I like it. Okay. Here's what I want to say about, and I actually don't know if I'm right about this. I think I'm right, but Kira, help me out here. So the way I read Paul talking about salvation in Romans is that salvation is something that for which all of creation yearns. All of creation is in desire, including like the cosmos, like the cicadas and the grasshoppers and the dogs and cats and all of that. Yes, even cats and humans and the whole bit. In some form and fashion, we're all yearning for salvation, which is lived out. Salvation is lived out in communion relationship with God. And what God does in Jesus is God undertakes the actual things that need to happen for that salvation to happen. So God, the world yearns for salvation. So God in Jesus saves the world. Okay? The world being the entire cosmos. Okay. Now, he doesn't make it so that if you want to go to heaven, you can. If you want to go to hell, you can. At least not in that simple way.
Right.
God does the thing that saves all creation. Now, the reality is that because we are who we are allowed to feel however we want to feel about that and respond to that however we want to respond to that. So if you don't want to be near God, that's your prerogative. Like you're made for love, and God has ensured that you have a divine destiny connected to that forever love. But if you are resistant to that love for whatever reason, God still allows you to resist. And there's suggestion throughout our scriptures that in the afterlife, if you want to continue to resist the love for which you were made, God will allow that. Judgment is not God in a black robe pronouncing a sentence.
Yeah.
Judgment literally is bringing justice, which is making things right. And Paul comes from, and in Romans it's a heavily Jewish population to whom he writes in that church. Not all, not exclusively, but there's a lot of Jews in the Roman church. And Paul is a Jew writing to his siblings, many of whom are Jewish Christians. They have a really strong understanding of that language of God's judgment and of a day of judgment, a day in which God shows up and makes things right. And so he's talking about the reality that there is going to be a moment when God is making all the things right. And in that moment, like what's true about you and the way you have lived will be made known. That's which, by the way, like all of our feelings about it aside, it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
It's very consistent. Now, what does that mean? Is that the same as saying God will create a list of the things you've done wrong and punish you for it, or make a list of things you've done right and figure out if there's a credit debit and where you are? Are you in the black or are you in the red? And then decide what to do with you based on that? I think we all realize how problematic that sounds. But that we will be confronted. Like, I feel pretty certain that I'm going to be confronted in my death by all that I've done in my life, that there will be a revelation to me of the fullness of my deeds, both good and ill. I believe that about, that seems right to me. Do I think that then when it's all over, God will be like, and having seen all these things, we have decided that you are going to tell him what he's won, Bob. You know, like, I don't think it's going to be like that. I think.
Have you seen The Good Place? Have you watched The Good
yeah.
Place?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. And the other one that, I mean, the movie that did this for me and there's another movie that did this for me 25 years ago was Defending Your Life by Albert Brooks, which is a movie about you die and you go to Judgment City and they look at your life, and the judges, because it's very kind of, like new agey. It's not like the judges look at your life and decide if you're ready to move on, so to speak. And that's based on if you've appropriately conquered fear in your life. That's what the metric is in that movie. But so if you understood salvation, that is something that's given to you, and it's there, it's done, and also you still have the freedom to decide what you want to do with it, but you also are, and this is important in Romans, like, for reasons that we don't understand, we are still hounded by sin. Sin still nags at us and tries to keep us in its thrall. And this keeps us, as Kira said, from doing always the things we want to do that we know are right. And so I think it's a little bit more complicated just than, like, it's actually quite complicated and it's messy. Paul's understanding of salvation is messy and doesn't fit neatly, which is why we've tried to make it fit neatly, because that makes everything easier for us, I think.
Yeah, I think one thing that is really important to all of this is that salvation is a gift and is a grace, and grace is something that we cannot earn and do not deserve.
By definition.
Yeah, by definition. And I think sometimes when we talk about not deserving it, or this kind of comes up usually around Ash Wednesday when people are like, oh, I don't need to like feel bad for all of the things I've done. Like, I'm actually a pretty good person. And it's like, well, but you aren't actually. like none of us are, we certainly we try to do good, but we inevitably fail. And yet God says, you don't have to earn this thing. I think we spend so much of our time, I feel like our kind of broader cultural script is one of having to earn what you get. You hear this all the time. I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, and that's why I'm the CEO of this company. Or if people just worked harder, or if people did X, then they could be successful. And that's pretty antithetical to the message that we're getting in scripture, which is that what we have in the gift of Christ is completely unearned and undeserved. And yet, because God loves us so much and God loves all of creation so much, God gives this gift to us.
There's only one thing I would add to that. It's not just that we don't deserve it. It's that there's no such thing as deserving it. It's like, it doesn't exist. Like, that's part of our problem, is we think like that when someone gives us something, what did I do to deserve this?
Mm-hmm.
No, I just wanted to get you something. Well, yeah, but I didn't get you anything. No, I know. That's how gifts are. Like, I wanted to, we have a new neighbor, and he brought me, he's from North Carolina, and I'd met him before he moved up here because he's moving in with his girlfriend and she's been living here, and he moved up from North Carolina, and he found out that I believe, and I still believe, that the greatest sausage I've ever had comes from the great state of North Carolina, the Tar Heel state, from Charlotte, North Carolina, and it's called Neeses, Neese''. It's fantastic. He came up from North Carolina and he brought me a bunch of sausage from Neeses.
Aww.
And I was like, this is amazing. Thank you so much. I cannot say enough how grateful I am. Thank you so much. Right. And then, like, later on, so then I was like, I know he likes the beer, and he likes local craft beers, and he's new to Cincinnati, and Cincinnati has a good number of craft beers. So I went out and talked to some friends. I'm not a big beer aficionado, but I'm okay with it, but I don't know it super well. So I found some beers that I knew were local that he should try, and I made a little mixed 6-pack grab bag thing. And I brought it to him, right? And you know what he said, right? He said, "You didn't have to do that." Well, yeah, I know. And I know it's just a thing we say, but that's my point, is it's a thing we say. That when someone gives us something, our initial reaction is, you didn't have to. And I always, when people say that to me, my stock response is, well, if I had to, it wouldn't have been any fun.
Yeah.
Like, no, you didn't, like, Jesus didn't save you because you earned it or because you didn't earn it. Jesus saved you because of who Jesus is. His name is literally deliverance. That's what the name means. That's what the name Jesus means, deliverance. Like, it's who he is. It's not about who you are. It's about who, his name isn't justice. His name is deliverance, right? His name isn't comeuppance.
Yeah.
Right? His name isn't quid pro quo, right? His name is deliverance. And that's the reality. Like, who are we worshiping? Like, the God of love, right?
Yeah. In all of this, I have over the last few years tried to make a spiritual practice out of receiving gifts, because I realized how uncomfortable I was with receiving gifts.
Yeah. Oh, are you?
And when people would kind of do something that I felt was going out of their way or was like too nice, and I've really tried to like rest in that over the last few years when somebody does something like that for me. And it's hard. And so sort of, I would invite anyone who's like listening to this to,
shower you with gifts?
No,
to
just
shower
to
you with gifts?
Start paying attention to your feelings around gifts and around people doing you favors or doing nice things for you, because you may realize that you feel like, oh, one, oh, I don't deserve this, or two, well, now I feel like I have to do something for you, like it's a transaction.
Yeah.
And to be in a state of feeling like you owe somebody something, but then like releasing that.
Yeah. Also, shower you with gifts.
I mean, cool.
I mean, obviously, when people give us gifts, we wonder where they're coming from, right? Like, I'm a very skeptical person.
Yes.
So I'm like, what do you want from me? What's coming up after this, or who knows? So it's tricky how we receive gifts. But I work really hard at being a good gift receiver. I try to be really upfront with people in my gratitude. Mm-hmm. And so when someone gives me a compliment, I work really hard, never, ever, ever to diminish the compliment. So I'll like, if someone says like, that was a really good sermon, I try really hard not to say, I
wrote it this morning.
I try very hard to say, thank you.
Yes.
I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me that it was meaningful to you. I want them to be meaningful to you. Like that is my hope. So thank you for telling me. Right. I try to do that. When people give gifts to the church, thank you so much. This gift is important. It facilitates ministries that are really important to me and to you. So I'm really grateful for your contribution. Like, I try to speak really plainly about gifts in that sense. And I try to work hard to connect that the gift giving is not connected to earning, which is tricky with churches, because you have a desire to show people, here's all the good stuff we're doing, don't forget, so that can be tricky. But to answer that question, Leslie, should we feel bad and beat ourselves up because we messed up, or should we analyze our mistakes and learn from it and try to do better for ourselves and others in the future? You're going to hate my answer here. Sometimes both. Like, look, part of learning this whole process of being gentle with ourselves is like, sometimes also you're going to beat yourself up, and that's also true. Like, and I don't want to tell you should, like, do I believe that God wants you to live and dwell in shame? No, I don't. I also know that sometimes you're going to feel shame, and the last thing you need to do is feel ashamed about feeling ashamed. That's like the sword that cuts twice, right? Like, so how we work our way out of our sin is a process that is messy. Paul literally says, work on your salvation with fear and trembling. And what he doesn't mean be afraid that you're going to hell. I don't think. I don't think. I think what he's talking about is this. Like, this is messy. As Dan says, show humility. Recognize that you've made mistakes. When I realize I've hurt someone, I feel bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I think actually 12-step groups offer a really good
yes,
kind of framework for
Yes.
for this, in terms of acknowledging where we've gone wrong, acknowledging I guess to speak broadly, like the bad things that we've done, and then to, if possible, and if it makes sense, to try and make amends.
Right.
And then like that process is not again not one that you're supposed to like self-flagellate during. It's about repentance,
Yes.
in Christian terminology, kind of acknowledging, asking for forgiveness, and then learning from it,
Right. Yes. I'm going to get really 21st century Gen X Episcopal priest on you here. I'm going straight for Brene Brown, and straight for the doc from Dr. Brene Brown. Mark Leslie says, feeling shame is natural, but I feel like it's easy to wallow in it and not move on. I really like, she's done a lot of work since, and her work is great. But Brene Brown's if you literally do nothing else, if you watch her first 2 TED Talks, like they're fundamental to, they should be, I think they're fundamental to my worldview, actually. Like if you want to like really talk about guilt and shame, just watch those, and they're simple. It's complex because life is complex, but the foundation of it is very simple. And part of what we've got to do is differentiate between shame and guilt. And her differentiation of shame and guilt, so she talks about people are wired this, and by the way, this fits the Christian worldview so beautifully. People are hardwired for connection. Yes. Shame is something that disrupts that connection and pushes us inward. And in a way that keeps us from the connection for which we were made. So that's bad. We know that, right? But she talks about like how people confuse guilt and shame. And her distillation of this is so clear. She said, guilt is saying I made a mistake. Shame is saying I am a mistake. Guilt is saying I did something wrong. Shame is saying I am something wrong. And the reality is they can be connected. One of the ways they're connected is we are afraid to acknowledge guilt, because shame, which is a sinful thing, it's an effective sin, teaches us, like, if you admit that, then it'll tell the truth about you. It's not just that you did something wrong, it's that you are something wrong. And so if you did something wrong, it's bad. So it's like, I can't say that I thought racist things, because that will mean a bad thing about me, and then I'm bad, instead of just acknowledging it, right? But like at the outset of my relationship with Kira, I said something the very first day I met you that later on, I was like, oh God, I can't believe I said that in front of her. And I can't believe she didn't just like haul back and smack me, or at least like verbally just go like, well, you're an idiot. And I sat in it for a little while, and I'm like, we're not even like friends yet. So like, but we're colleagues and we have a mutual friend, and like, what do I do? And so then I was like, well, this is terrible. I'm going to contact her, because she might not be I thought like you might not accept my apology, and I might not, whether or not I deserve it, who knows? But the shame was keeping me from at least seeking to make amends and acknowledging my guilt. So I message you and I acknowledge my guilt, and you accept my apology, and we're very gracious, and we moved forward. And the shame still lingers because I'm a person, but it doesn't win. It doesn't own the situation. And friendship is able to emerge, and connection is able to emerge.
Yeah. Well, and so much of Brene Brown's stuff is also about vulnerability. And so I think one of the things that you could have done in that instance would have just been like, oh, like whatever, she probably didn't even notice, or like, but you came to me and you were vulnerable about your error, and I accepted your apology. And like that created the opportunity for a deeper connection and for like our friendship
Right.
to flourish in a way that like it probably would not have otherwise. Like not because you made this kind of off the cuff comment, but just because like you were like emotionally vulnerable with me, and
Right. And like
likewise.
you were like, oh, he was like a guy that was fine, but oh, he's willing to just say that and be
Yeah, like this guy's legit.
oh, okay. Well, look at that. A guy who can apologize without being forced.
Yeah.
Right. And I straight up, just for the record, like not to pat myself on the back for like learning how to be shitty better. Like, but like I didn't say like I apologize if like, or
Right.
I'm sorry if I'm like, so I did this and this was dumb and I'm sorry. And you were sort of like, it really didn't bother me that much. And I was like, I believe you, but still and also I'm apologizing and I don't need to make it bigger than it is, but I don't like that. I don't like this about me and that. And you were like, oh, okay, we're cool. And I was like, oh, okay, we're cool. And then it's like, take that, shame.
Yeah.
Like, shame doesn't get to go. Oh, I will never tell anyone what I said, Leslie. It was not good. It was like sexist garbage. Like it was sexist garbage. It wasn't like the worst thing in the world. It wasn't like misogyny. It wasn't like awful. But it was just like a throwaway, like it was a total throwaway part of my like reptilian brain. And I was just speaking casually in front of a friend and a friend of a friend. And I said something that was like kind of sexist because I'm kind of sexist. Like I'm struggling with the fact that I'm kind of sexist and I don't want to be. I think you can tell that I don't want to be, but it's in there, right? I was raised in this place, right? And so like, I'm like, oh yeah, like look at me doing that thing that I don't like when people do. Okay. And so I'm it, yeah. And I don't want to make it too much about myself. The point is the idea of shame and guilt.
Yes.
And overcoming shame and acknowledging guilt can actually be a real, like in just look at us. It can be an example of a real friendship being forged. And then like, so I do think and then we got to wrap up, but I do think like when we talk about Christianity, when we talk about in the way that we understand repentance and all of the scriptural language that has oftentimes been used abusively, repentance is really important. Acknowledging guilt is really important. It's not about wallowing and feeling terrible. It's about the fact that you probably do feel something and you recognize a disconnect between what God wants and where you are. and acknowledging that is painful sometimes because again, we are scared of what that means about us. Right? I was scared. Am I a bad guy? And obviously, and also, will she think I'm a bad guy? Right? Like, will people think of me? Right? And so the language that Paul uses over and over again in his letters, like Galatians and Romans, we're studying Galatians in our Bible study, and that's what got Leslie. I told her she should read Romans as like a really interesting sort of, they counter each other in sort of interesting ways. But in both cases, you know, Paul is talking about how we turn towards each other and how we acknowledge guilt and move through it with God's help into places of better health and healing in our relationships, in our friendships, in our life. So, and by the way, and then when you die, you get to go to heaven, which is awesome. Or like Kira says, heaven comes down. Let's be clear. We're not all that clear on what happens.
Right. No, we're not. But like, it's good.
It's good. And I sit a lot with Jesus saying, of course, of course, the resurrection is real. Jesus says, He says, you have heard it said, our God saying, I am the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. God is the God of the living, not the God of the dead. So Jesus is saying, in God's love, we all, not just as ideas, but our real selves, we are alive after death in God.
Yes.
That's enough for me, friends. Like,
there is eternal life.
Right. And we're a part of it.
Yes.
That's great. I'm in. Like, I don't know what else. I have a lot of questions and some concerns. But anyways, Kara, we got to wrap up, but I definitely am curious about what you've been listening to.
My love for Taylor Swift, who has had like
Yes.
the best pandemic ever. I mean,
just knocking it out of the park.
seriously, like I try not to, obviously I'm not Taylor Swift, and I'm trying not to kind of compare my productivity levels to hers.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
But so if those of you who may not know, like she had a big split with her record label and basically had a big lawsuit, and they own all of her material. So she has been re-recording her old material and released the album Fearless, which initially came out in 2008, I think.
Wow.
And kind of released her new version, Taylor's version. And it's just that album, like it takes me back. The songs just take me back to like.
Is she trying to reproduce it note for note, or is she doing like a new spin on each song?
I mean, they're very similar, but like the productions are a little bit different.
Okay. Great.
And I think she is recording them from a different place. Obviously, she's older now. I think she's a stronger vocalist now, and that comes through. And those songs, like she's just a really, really good songwriter, and her the emotion of that album captures a very particular like teenage crush heartbreak thing.
Yeah. Which is just potent, isn't it? Like, I don't know this album, but I know that feeling.
It's just like the heroine of feelings. Like it's just so pure and like
for the four.
Such a drug. Like
that's a four talking.
And so I've been listening to that a lot and kind of time traveling a little bit to that place of both really strong endorphin emotions and like really potent, pure heartbreak. And yeah, it's I don't know if it's like necessarily the most healthy thing to do, but hey.
Again,
here's the thing. Nobody writes songs about taking care of your husband after he had oral surgery, even though that is love.
I've been thinking about this, like the songs that I would write if I were a songwriter aren't like that's why I'm not a songwriter, because no one wants to hear songs about like my wife has narcolepsy. Like that's not a song. Like who's listening to that? Like Snoozin' Susie? Like what do we call it? Like you have to turn it into like some pop riff, and it's like right, like she never gets rest at night. Like who wants to? That's not a song, right? Like she's on a new medication. Like I don't know. So it's crazy. Like the things that we experience in our lives with our families. It's like who writes about this? So yeah, we tap into these sort of like more universal, like and younger, like primal, like the awakening of love, which is the awakening of pain. Frankly, I love it. I love that. So I jammed on the Beatles today. I put on the Help album, which is almost a perfect album. But the last song, Dizzy Miss Lizzy, is garbage. But like, and it's not by them. I mean, it's a fine song by whoever originally did it. Oh, it might be Little Richard. But the other 13 songs are all originals, and they're like stunning. And then they cap it off with this thing at the end, and you're like, no one needed that. Just end with Yesterday. Yesterday is just call it, right? And the next album after Help is Rubber Soul, where they really start to get like out there. I'm a big Beatles person. I don't know if you care at all about the Beatles.
I mean, they're the Beatles. It's hard to like not care about them.
People find a way.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not like into them.
I'm like
into the Beatles.
And it goes in waves. Like,
right.
I got into them when I was 14. When you get into things when you're 14,
they stick with you, man.
Forever. Yeah. It's amazing when something actually gets into your brain and becomes a favorite that you discovered as an adult. Because when you really look at the things that you became your favorites, you're literally describing high school years.
I know. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's just like that's when everything kind of solidifies and gets formed. But that's really true. And I'm interested to see, like, I think about that a lot with like my parents and like my grandparents and like the things that they kind of turned to for like musical comfort food. And then it's like, oh, great, I'm going to be like 65 years old and listening to Weezer's The Blue Album. Like,
and you will be. And watching watching like reruns of Full House or something.
Friends or like,
oh yeah, and being like, yeah, totally. Is that what life was like when you were growing up? No, but we still watched it.
Yeah.
There's nothing like this at all. We love it so much. Oh, I love that. Oh, that's so great. Okay. All right. So for me, it's Beatles. Oh, and the AC/DC song Thunderstruck is now one of my child's favorite. My son Wesley, this is now his favorite song. And I am perfectly comfortable with that choice. So, all right. We've gone too long.
No,
as per usual.
You're raising kids with good taste, man.
That's what I'm trying to do. And and just to bookend things, I'm sitting at the kitchen table because it's the only place where there's not windows behind me in this whole house and I'm not backlit. And I'm like looking at the table. Here's a stray Applejack. Here's some Frosted Flakes. These are all within reach.
We're coming full circle.
Yeah, you can wonder why I asked the question. It's because I'm just inundated with garbage.
Well, we would love to hear more of your questions. Today was great, like talking about salvation and what that means. A great topic. But like if you also just want to ask like, hey, what's that weird color that you wear? Or what does your week look like as a priest when you're not, talking on YouTube or leading worship or preaching? Those are all good questions. Anything kind of about our lives as clergy or the Bible or God or, I thought before we had a question, I was going to go with 420 and kind of talking about like drugs. And
I wanted to talk about vaccinations and we went off into a different topic. So I get it. We haven't talked about drugs. I'm comfortable talking about drugs. We could see where that goes. I've never, like, it's not like a real hot topic these days, but we could.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing because different states have different laws right now. And
right.
Does that affect how we as a church deal with that? Like, how is alcohol as a drug different from methamphetamines as a drug? Like, okay. Anyway, we'll see you all next week at
Look what you've done
on YouTube. Send us your questions and hope you have a good, blessed week.
Y'all are wonderful.